Welcome to the Economist in Your Ear podcast. Imagine this. You show up for a job interview, you've prepped, you feel good, but you get rejected before you even say a word. Not because of some obvious bias, but because an algorithm looked at your photo and decided something about your personality. Should a picture, just a simple photograph, ever be the reason a company decides not to hire someone?
That really is the core question here, isn't it? It's incredibly high stakes. We're looking at this sort of emerging technology where facial analysis algorithms claim they can figure out complex things like how conscientious you are just from your photo.
Wow.
Yeah, so we need to dig into whether that signal even exists reliably and, is the ethical and legal cost just too high?
Okay, right. Let's unpack this. There's a key piece of academic work driving a lot of this discussion, isn't there?
There is. It's a paper by Marius Gansel and colleagues called AI Personality Extraction from Faces, Labor Market Implications. They really wanted to test this predictive idea directly.
And how do they go about that? What kind of data did they use?
Well, they needed a big, significant data set. So they focused on a pretty high-achieving group, around 96,000 MBA graduates. They give them the photos, obviously, but also loads of detailed info on actual career outcomes like salary, promotions, job changes over time, real-world stuff.
Okay, so they have the photos and the career data. How did they try to link the two? What were they looking for in the faces?
They used an algorithm to try and estimate what they call the photo Big Five.
Ah, the big five personality traits. Just to remind listeners, that's openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism, right? The standard model in psychology.
Exactly. So the algorithm's job was basically to guess the scores for these 5 traits using only the face image. Nothing else.
And what did they find? Could it actually predict anything?
Well, this is where it gets interesting and maybe a bit concerning. They found that these photo Big Five scores did seem to offer some extra predictive power for those career outcomes.
Extra power, meaning even after you account for the usual things.
Yes, exactly. Even after controlling for standard metrics like, GPA, GMAT scores, even how prestigious the business school was, the face-based personality scores still added a little bit more predictive accuracy for things like salary and seniority.
So there is a signal there, statistically speaking.
There is a signal, but, and this is really, really important, the predictive power is very modest, small even. The researchers themselves are very clear about this. The vast majority of why someone succeeds or doesn't succeed in their career is not explained by what the algorithm sees in their face. It's a tiny sliver of insight, not some kind of crystal ball.
Okay, so it's a weak signal. But despite that, companies seem really interested. Why the temptation to use something like this if the gain is so small?
Yeah, that's the puzzle, isn't it? I think it boils down to a couple things. Scale is probably the biggest one. Think about traditional hiring for high-level jobs. Assessment centers, deep interviews. They take time, they cost a lot of money per person, or long personality tests.
Right, which candidates might try to game anyway?
Precisely. So the first big selling point for facial analysis is scalability. You just need a photo, which most people submit anyway. You could, in theory, apply it instantly to thousands, tens of thousands of applicants, filter the pool cheaply.
And that leads to the second point, the idea that it's harder to fake, right? You can practice answers for a personality test, but your face... Well, your face.
That's the clang.
That it's a more objective measure, less susceptible to a candidate just telling the company what they think it wants to hear. So the promise is efficiency, finding potential soft skills or personality fit earlier, maybe reducing bad hires.
And some even argue it could open things up, like find talent that doesn't have the usual credentials.
That's the more radical argument, yeah. If the algorithm spots conscientiousness in a face, maybe you don't need that top-tier degree quite so much. Sort of democratizing, they might say.
It sounds tempting, fast, cheap, maybe even fairer in some ways, but this feels like it's walking into a minefield, scientifically and ethically. It sounds a bit like old, discredited ideas. It absolutely does. And that's the strongest scientific pushback. Critics basically say this is just a high-tech version of physiognomy.
Physiognomy? That's the old thing about judging character from face shape, right? Like he has a shifty look about him based on his nose. Sounds like Victorian pseudoscience.
Pretty much. It was popular centuries ago, but it's been completely debunked. There's a quote from a critic that sums it up starkly. Predicting personality from faces. Bad science, worse ethics. That tells you how controversial this is.
And the core problem is that even if there's a tiny correlation across a huge group...
Right. It doesn't mean the model works accurately for you, the individual applicant. The effect sizes are just too small for that kind of individual prediction.
So companies relying heavily on this could easily filter out perfectly good candidates just because their face didn't fit the algorithm's pattern for, say, extroversion or something. Lots of false negatives.
Exactly. And that's where the legal risks really start to bite. You get into this danger zone of proxy discrimination.
Proxy discrimination, meaning even if the algorithm isn't told to look at race or gender,
it might pick up on facial features that just happen to correlate strongly with those protected characteristics.
So the features become a stand-in, a proxy for race or gender, even if it's unintentional.
Precisely. Imagine the algorithm learns, from historical data perhaps, that a certain facial structure, more common in one ethnic group, correlates with lower scores on agreeableness in past job outcomes. Even if the hiring manager never sees demographic data, the algorithm is effectively filtering out people from that group disproportionately. That bumps right up against anti-discrimination laws.
And it gets worse if the AI learns from biased historical data, doesn't it? If past discrimination held certain groups back.
The algorithm learns that disadvantage as a predictive feature. It doesn't just reflect existing societal inequalities, it could actually amplify them. It basically encodes historical bias and projects it into the future, at scale. Structural bias, supercharged by tech.
Wow. Beyond the legal and statistical issues, what about the sort of human impact, the dignity aspect?
Yeah, I think this is fundamentally troubling. What does it do to someone's sense of agency if they're told, essentially, sorry, your face suggests low conscientiousness, based on some black box algorithm?
It feels incredibly disempowering. What's the point of trying to improve or work hard if your face sends the wrong signal?
Exactly. It suggests a kind of fixed destiny written on your features. The whole idea of personal growth, learning, demonstrating competence that relies on the belief that our actions and efforts matter more than our static appearance, this undermines that. It's like saying your cheekbones determine your career path.
And good luck trying to challenge it if you get rejected.
Right.
The transparency issue.
The transparency gap is huge. Most of these AI systems are black boxes. If you suspect you were filtered out because of your photo, how do you even know? How do you appeal? It makes accountability almost impossible for the candidate.
Which must just destroy trust in the hiring process overall.
Completely. It makes it feel arbitrary, maybe even unfair, based on something you can't control, rather than your actual skills or experience.
So, okay. We have a weak signal, potentially shaky science, huge legal risks, massive ethical concerns. The big question then, should companies actually use this technology?
Look, based on where things stand right now, the reason to answer has to be no, especially not as a key decision-making tool, certainly not for high-skilled jobs. The risks just seem to vastly outweigh any tiny potential benefits.
Although, just to play devil's advocate for a second, you know hiring isn't perfect now. People do get judged on appearance already, right? There's the height premium, conscious and unconscious biases are everywhere. Couldn't you argue a well-designed algorithm might be less biased than a human interviewer?
That's a fair point to raise. Hiring is flawed. But the difference here is scale and recourse. A biased human interviewer affects a few candidates. A biased algorithm can discriminate against thousands instantly, often invisibly. And challenging that algorithmic decision is, as we said, incredibly difficult.
So if it were ever to be used, it would need incredibly strict guardrails. What would that even look like?
You'd be talking about a very narrow scenario. Maybe companies hiring huge numbers of people for very similar, perhaps lower stakes roles. And even then, it could only be one tiny data point among many, never decisive. And you'd absolutely need robust safeguards. A human must always be able to override the algorithm. There needs to be transparency about its use. And critically, candidates must have a clear way to opt out of having their photo analyzed like this.
Otherwise, it feels like companies might just chase the shiny new tech, this algorithm fetish, instead of doing the harder work of actually fixing deeper issues in hiring.
I think that's a real danger. The focus should be on things we know work better and are less risky. Things like properly anonymizing resumes for initial screening, using standardized work sample tests that actually measure relevant skills, investing in ongoing bias training for interviewers.
Yeah, those seem like much more solid investments than relying on a face-reading algorithm. More impact, less peril.
Definitely. So the recommendation for companies considering this isn't go ahead carefully. It's more like don't use it on actual candidates yet.
Yeah.
If you want to explore it, pilot it internally first. Test it rigorously. Audit the outcomes like crazy, especially for fairness. Is it disproportionately flagging people from protected groups? You need to be absolutely sure about legal compliance and fairness before it ever touches a real hiring decision.
Ultimately, it comes back to that fundamental question, doesn't it? Even if AI can find these tiny correlations, should we allow something as fixed as facial features interpreted by an opaque algorithm to start shaping people's economic opportunities?
It forces us to decide what we value more. Is it the potential for marginal efficiency gains at scale?
Yeah.
Or is it the principle that people should be judged on who they are and what they can do, not just what their face looks like to a machine?
Thanks for listening. Follow us for daily insights into world affairs, and don't forget to like, comment, and share.